Hello, class. So I hope you guys are ready for another day of Bible class and a new story that I've been talking about since last week, the story of Lazarus. So today's story is not going to be a play or anything like that, as much as I would like for it to be. Today we're just going to be reading it out of the Bible. Okay? So be sure to pay attention to today's story because it's a really good one. But before we go into the story, let's go over our memory verse for this week again. So, once again, the memory verse is in Philippians 1, verse 6. I hope you guys are practicing it. Hope you wrote it down yesterday 3 times in one note. So, the verse says, I am sure that God, who began the good work within you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on that day when Christ Jesus comes back again. Philippians 1, verse 6. Very good. Now, let's go ahead and begin our story of Lazarus. Now, like I told you, Lazarus was Mary and Martha's brother. Mary and Martha are the two people from our story last week, the two women who were expecting Jesus, who Martha was very worried about, cooking and cleaning, keeping the house in order, and her priorities were not in the right place. And Mary, who was also concerned with that until Jesus arrived, was worried about being with Jesus and having a relationship with Jesus. And Jesus had to remind Martha, hello, Martha, those things are important, but what's more important is having a relationship with me. So that was our story last week, and now we're going to talk about their brother, Lazarus. Lazarus was a really good friend of Jesus's. And I don't know if you remember, I mentioned this kind of yesterday. A few weeks ago, we talked about how Jesus only raised 3 people from the dead, and one of them is Lazarus, his good friend. So let's go ahead and get into the story. We're reading from John chapter 11, starting at verse 1, all the way to verse 48. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and take it out and read along with me. My version might be a little different than yours, and that's okay. You can read along or listen along, okay? So, chapter 11, verse 1. A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. That's another story. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what Lazarus was sick with, but just that he was very sick and that it was urgent. They really wanted Jesus to come to help him, to heal him, because they knew that he had made a blind man see, he made a lame man walk, he healed a leper. So they're like, he can surely heal Lazarus. So continuing verse 4. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. Now, it's kind of funny that Jesus said that, right? It's saying that his sickness will not end in death. Something's gonna happen to show God's glory and his power and give him the glory. And I'd be a little confused if I heard that. I'd be like, well, what's gonna happen? So let's see. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to the disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago, people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him. The disciples said, Lord, if he is sleeping, he will soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So sometimes we say that somebody is sleeping, or especially in the Bible, it might say somebody's sleeping, but it's because that's when you die. We talked about this in class before. I don't know if you guys remember, but when you die, you don't go anywhere. You're in the ground. You're just there, and you're dead until Jesus comes back. And so that's why we say that we're sleeping, because it's almost like you're in the same state as being asleep. You don't really know what's going on when you're sleeping. You're unaware. So it's the same thing. So they compare it to being asleep. But Jesus meant that he actually died, but was asleep in the grave. So, verse 14. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. Again, if I heard Jesus say this, I'd be like, what? What do you mean? I'm really going to believe now? What's he got up his sleeve? I'd be like, something's going to happen because of all these little hints that Jesus is dropping. Continuing on verse 16. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let's go too and die with Jesus. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. So a lot of people were at Martha and Mary's house, and it was kind of like, when somebody dies in your family, people are sad and they're comforting each other and hugging each other and trying to be there for each other. And that's exactly what was happening with Mary and Martha. Verse 20. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus told her, Your brother will rise again. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. So Martha, even though she was sad that she lost her brother, she knew that Lazarus loved Jesus and, believed in Jesus. So whenever that last day is, when Jesus comes back, that he was going to rise again then. But Jesus was talking about a little sooner than that one day that's going to come. So Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never ever die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she told him. I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. Then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, The teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. So she said the same thing that Martha said. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. So this shows that Jesus, had human emotions. Even though he knew that Lazarus was going to live again, he was going to bring him from the dead, it still hurt him to see all the people, suffering because of their loss, because they lost Lazarus. Where have you put him? He asked them. They told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. So Jesus also cried. Wept means to cry. So Jesus also cried about the loss. And it's kind of funny to think that he cried even though he knew what he was about to do. But it still hurts to see somebody you love be suffering. And it still hurts to, lose people. So starting at verse 36. The people who were standing nearby said, See how much he loved him? But some said, This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying? Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. But Jesus responded, Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believed? So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, This is the good part, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." And that's the end. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that just like incredible? First of all, the reason why I like the story is one, it shows Jesus' human side. It shows the emotions that he had. He loved Lazarus, he loved Mary and Martha. And so, it shows that he was also sad, that he can also get sad. And then it shows God's glory and God's power. It's amazing power to raise somebody from the dead, somebody that everybody knew was dead. They knew that Lazarus was dead. He had been dead for 4 days. They were all there weeping and crying over him for 4 days. And Jesus was somewhere else. And that's why when he told the disciples, he told the disciples that you're going to see my glory. You just wait and see. He's going to rise again. He was dropping hints this whole time. And so it shows that this wasn't staged. This wasn't something that he set up with Mary and Martha to show God's power. No, 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 no. They had no clue about it. You can tell in his conversation with them. They both said the same thing. They're like, "Lord, if you were here, he wouldn't have died. You would have kept him from this. You would have healed him." And yeah, sure, Jesus could have done that, right? As soon as he got the call, not a real call, like there were no phones back then, but as soon as he got word that Lazarus was sick, Jesus could have been on his way to Bethany to heal Lazarus. However, he decided to wait to show God's power even more. Because yes, he would have still been showing God's power if he went there and healed Lazarus, just like he healed the blind man, just like he healed the lame man, just like he healed the leper. He could have done that, and it would have been great. But he only raised people from the dead 3 times. And this is one of those times. And it just shows this one was very publicly. Very publicly. So all those people saw God's power right then and there with somebody that was so close to Jesus. And again, when Jesus cried, when Jesus wept, they said, like, this shows how much he loved him. He's hurting too. And yet he still brought him back from the dead. It's just an amazing story. I really, really enjoyed that story. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that story as well, because it really is a good story. Alright guys, so tomorrow we are going to talk about what this story has to do with what we've been talking about this whole time, about, special friendships and the special ingredients that they can add to your life, and tie it into last week's story with Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters. So tomorrow we're going to just add it all together and end this section of our Bible stories, okay? So I really hope you enjoyed the story. I hope that you learned something new of how mighty God is. And again, be practicing your memory verse because this Friday you have a quiz, okay? So I'll see you guys later, and don't forget to tune in at 1 o'clock for Week of Prayer.